All right, y'all, welcome back to Outside the Diamond. Today is a special one because we've got a returning guest, one of the most influential pitching voices of the last few decades, Mr. Leo Mazzone. Leo, we're glad to have you back. This episode is a little bit different than what we've done here in the past because today's episode is all about the evolution of pitching and then how we went from pitchers simply delivering a ball to be hit to the modern era, tracking, tunneling, and everything that kind of comes with it. But here's kind of what makes this conversation a little bit different is we're not here to argue old school versus new school. We just want to try to understand what changed, what caused it to change, why it changed, and what never changes when it comes to getting outs. So we're going to go deep: rules, pitch types, arm slots, workloads, technology development, the whole shebang. And like always on Outside the Diamond, we want the stories and the truth. So, Leo, let's jump right in.
Absolutely. We'll see where it takes us.
I'm so glad to have you back. I'm so glad. I've been waiting.
glad
Been waiting for the voices.
Well,
and,
I'm glad to be here.
and actually, before we start,
Before we start, we'd like to thank Bridgestone again. They're sponsoring this show,
Okay.
and they've given us some balls. I've got a dozen balls for
Oh,
you, which I
beautiful.
know you love golf. And,
Yes.
or playing it a lot.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
number one ball fitter in golf,
Oh, boy.
and Tiger's ball for the last 20 years.
I
believe.
think it was last 20
Really?
years, yeah.
So this is a slower swing speed ball for
Oh, yeah, for an old man.
us.
I know. You can say it.
For us.
For a fossil.
Well,
Thank you. I
hit
appreciate
'em
that.
straight and
What courses you play up? Because you're up.
Up in South Carolina, Anderson.
Yeah, what courses? What
Well,
big
you play
courses?
Boscobel, you play Pine Lake, you play, different. There's about 5 or 6 different courses that you play. And I have a group that plays every Tuesday and Thursday, and we go out and have some fun and have a good time.
that's great.
Yeah. I mean, you got to get out and move, you know?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
otherwise,
Agreed.
you just kind of get stoved up.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so, getting right into it and kind of setting the tone. So, if you zoom all the way out, what do you think is the biggest misconception fans have about how pitching started when the job was basically to serve the hitter?
Yeah.
They just wanted the ball to be hit.
Well, imagine that, I mean, because we wanted the ball to be hit. We wanted the ball to be hit on the end or on the handle. So they already had a smart thinking behind that right out of the gate. But, if you watch somebody pitch underhand and you want somebody to hit the ball, I mean, that's how it all started. And then you start getting into arm slots where you go, they would go underhand, submarine, low 3/4, sidearm, and then that way you started changing the movement of the ball.
Yeah.
And changed everything that hitters see also. So it just started to continue on and continue on.
Yeah, most people don't even know the underhand era was typically it was from the 1840s all the way to the 1870s. So obviously the motion was largely underhand or low with limited wrist manipulation compared to today. And then obviously strategy leaned more towards location, pace changes, and fielding rather than breaking stuff.
And you know what's funny? When I was growing up, the coaches used to tell you if you pitch sidearm, you're going to get a sore arm. I used to hear that all the time, and that's absolutely untrue.
Right.
It's not true at all.
It's
Matter of
horrible.
fact, an over-exaggerated overhand is going to hurt you a lot more than sidearm or
That's
submarine.
right.
Yeah,
Why would they?
underhand.
Why do you think they would say that? Is
Because it was unorthodox.
Gotcha.
What was normal now is unorthodox.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Gotcha.
I don't know where some of these people get their ideas, but and it's still going on today too. By the way,
Yeah.
So the overhand, then obviously there's 30 years where it's the underhand era. Then it transitions into where overhand became legal, and that's from 1870s to about the 1880s. So when overhand became legal, what do you think, in your perspective, what did that unlock physiologically for pitchers, like confidence, aggression, creativity?
right? I mean, it added a whole different spin to it, as I should say. How about that? Ain't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing up my
Oh,
sleeve.
that's right. Yeah. Anyway, well, you could make the ball do something. You could make it move left, right, up, down, whatever. And then they started experimenting with different types of pitches. And then before you know it, you're throwing harder, you're making the ball move, and you're starting to change speeds a little bit. And from early on, hubby and I were talking about this. Change of speeds was always at the beginning of everything that we talked about in these different eras.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, and guess what's good today? I mean, it'd be changing speeds, The great Hank Aaron told me one time, he said, Leo, he said, make sure you tell your pitchers one thing for me. And I said, what's that, Hank? He goes, we can time a jet coming through the strike zone if we see it often enough. Well, they talked about that in the 1800s.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if they talk about that anymore or not. I just want to see how hard you can throw.
No, that's
Right.
all they want to do is just see spin rate and just throw 100, 102, 103.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you think really changed first? Do you think it was the pitcher's mechanics, the hitter's approach, or the coach's expectations once overhand became legal in the late 1800s?
The pitcher's mechanics, I think. I don't think the coaches would have had much to much to do with it.
Right.
And then I think the hitters, now we got to make an adjustment. What do they tell us all the time? Hitters, you got to adjust.
Right.
So anyway, I think it was the pitchers first and the hitters second. I don't think the coaches knew any different at that particular time.
Right,
Matter of
they were
fact, there's a
just
lot of coaches now that don't know any different.
So, by the I think late 1880s, getting into about the 1890s, is when the 60-foot, 6-inch modern mound context came into play. So obviously the standardization about the distance in the mound practices kind of created the modern runway for velocity and movement optimization. How important do you think that distance is to everything that we think of as stuff today?
Well, I think the most important thing people should know is that if you're 12 years old and you're pitching from a little league distance, and the next year, if you have to go to 60 feet, 6 inches, you have a real good chance of hurting your arm. There has to be an intermediate distance, when you're 13.
Right.
And so anyway, the height of the mound, like you said, the downhill action to the hitter. Now, where they come up with 60 feet, 6 inches is something I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't find it in all my research where that came from.
But anyway, they sure got it right. And so, it's all part of the evolution of the game to where on a mound, 60 feet, 6 inches going downhill to a catcher. And apparently they had something figured out that it created this type of competition. So,
right.
I know me and Dad, we were talking about it. Didn't they? They originally they had a mound and then they kind of took it away and then they added it back in
Right.
for some reason.
Well, I think for some reason when you pitch off of a mound, it's easier on your arm and the angle going down to the hitter
Because you're able to drive off the mound.
Yes, and your momentum carries you down. So
Right.
therefore, it completely defeats the purpose of flat-footed throwing, what they do today. So if you go, if you go down and I guarantee you that's why they raised the mound, because it's more conducive to healthy arms. To be honest with you, and you always loved a high mound. I mean, the flat one when you knew your front foot was going to hit before you expected it to, that would really hurt your back or do something that would bother you.
Right.
So you always had to tell the pitcher your first 3 or 4 warm-up pitches, if we're on the road, that's to see, get used to the slope of the mound.
Right.
So anyway, that's how it started right there, what we're talking about.
Right.
So once the rules opened the door, the next evolution was essentially the pitches themselves. It went from underhand, now it's overhand. And then the evolution was the pitches themselves, because now you could actually make the ball do something a lot more with wrist manipulation.
Right. So they started spinning the ball.
That's right.
Which that was the biggest difference to start with, the curveball.
That's right. And then you had to, you had backspin on a fastball. You changed the direction of the spin on a breaking ball. You had smaller breaking balls and bigger breaking balls, and then you had your changeup.
Right.
And so now you've added a whole different dimension. Now the hitters have to adjust.
Yes.
You know, I mean, and to me, it's hard for me to imagine how they adjusted so quickly. And, you know, from what I understand, you know, that takes some kind of special talent to adjust to, you know, pitches like that when you're only used to seeing something sidearm or whatever. But,
Right.
you know, when you watch a film of like Christy Mathewson or somebody like that throwing bullets from down by the side, you know,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, you know, it starts to raise, you get raise higher and get higher and get higher. And now it's a completely different pitch.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so when you have a completely different pitch and then you have 3 or 4 that you've added to your arsenal,
Right.
it took quite a talent for a hitter to be able to adjust to that.
Well, locked up here.
So
When you're evaluating
yes.
a pitcher
Mm.
and his pitch, do you go to grip first? The way he finishes it, release,
Mm.
arm angle? Does that determine whether he's going to throw curveball or slider or, you know?
What you do is you grade, you do everything off the fastball, and so I want to see a release on the fastball where there's life on the pitch when it gets to home plate. In other words, it sometimes, like for example, we had Kent Merker, pretty much a one pitch guy, pitched for 17 years, and his fastball would never get over 90 miles an hour,
Right.
but it exploded once it got to home plate. So you had a lot of life on the ball when it came across home plate.
Right.
So that's the one thing you want to look at. And then number 2, you watch their delivery, and you have to teach somebody that hasn't been throwing breaking balls,
Right.
number 1, how to spin it, and number 2, that you want to have a 3-step period in doing that. You want to throw it first, turn it second, pull it in third. Okay, now, then you start with the pitcher and you go, okay, I just want you to try to throw this breaking ball and turn the corner. Just turn a little corner a little bit.
Right.
Right.
You know, and then so they would throw it first, then turn it, then pull it in. And then I'd say, okay, now I want you to pull this one in a little more. Well, what you did was the more you pulled the ball in, the bigger the break. The less you pulled the ball in, the smaller the break.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So now you went from basically a cutter or a slider to a short curve to a curveball. Now, you did all this without changing the grip.
McMichael talked about that.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if you're doing that, you don't have to change grips. You have the same feel for everything. If you understand the mechanics of not hooking it real early, you know, and if you throw it first before you turn it, you actually turn it earlier than you think, but you're not creating it way back behind you. Because if you try to create it way back behind you, you know, it's way too much work to get through the slot. So you look at those types of things, you know, and then you look at the straight change, you know, and then your approach to the straight change is the least amount you can take off and still be effective. Don't come and tell me, oh, it's got to be 9 or 10 miles an hour's difference. No, it doesn't. We had Mike Remlinger who threw 91 mile an hour fastballs. Changeup was 87.
Right.
It's a change of speeds.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
So now here's a great example of it not do. John Smoltz could not throw a straight change. He had such a great breaking ball that if he threw a straight change and got burned on it, it'd drive him crazy,
Yeah,
you know?
that's with him.
And so anyway, so I'm sitting there going in the early 90s, very early 90s, and he needs a third pitch, especially for left-handed hitters. So, you know, I thought he had the perfect delivery for a split. So what do? I go have a meeting with Bruce Sutter. I'm going to have lunch with a guy that has the greatest split in the history of baseball because I want to make sure that the information I give Smoltz is the right information.
Right.
So Bruce and I had dinner or a lunch, and then I went to the ballpark and I said, Smoltzy, I got something for you. And Smoltzy, being the great athlete that he is, started to pick it up real quick. And then once he got that, it was lights out.
Lights
you know,
out.
yeah, it was lights out.
Absolutely.
It didn't matter if you were left, right, or whatever you were. But but what I'm saying is when we're talking about the evolution of pitching and the spins and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you were down by the side, it's hard to throw a curveball. You threw what they call it today a sweeper.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
talking about that.
Yeah, you know, and you sweep it across the plate instead of an off-speed breaking ball. It's a kind of a a hanging slow breaking ball, you know, and guys start early and can't stay back.
Right.
So you had that, and you had a smaller breaking ball from underneath, and then you had a fastball that you would try to elevate, or you know, if it was Quisenberry or somebody like that, then it would sink like crazy.
Right.
Right.
So you adapt to the individual.
Right.
You know, for example, Glavin was a fastball changeup guy with an occasional breaking ball.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Smoltzy was fastball slider split, breaking ball split. And Smoltzy did the throw, turn, and pull breaking ball where he could break one bigger or smaller.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Greg Maddux was a sinker baller, movement, cutter, change of speeds. Now, we're not talking that these guys had 11 pitches like they talk about on TV today.
Right.
That's a joke.
They
But
call
anyway,
it kitchen sink.
anyway, yeah, I want to get
pitchers,
it. Yeah. Oh, that's a joke. Come on.
Yeah.
You know.
So what separates a pretty curveball and a curveball that gets guys out? Is it the late break? Is it
It's the change of speeds on it.
okay?
Okay. Now, we used to say if you threw a smaller breaking ball and a bigger breaking ball, you always wanted the bigger breaking ball following the smaller breaking ball.
Right. Right.
Instead of the opposite way.
Right.
Because, you know, if they saw a hard breaking ball, you know, and now all of a sudden they say, well, he's coming back with that hard breaking ball, and it comes in, but it's not as hard.
And you get him out.
then you're out front.
That's
you know,
right.
And so you would, you know, there's an adjustment there.
Right.
You know, so I mean, it's not that difficult, but the play, you know, you have to have talent to work with, for crying out loud.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, if somebody is a youngster, say he's 12, 13, getting up, you know, 13 years old or whatever, you can start doing that with a youngster if he has a nice release on his fastball. Now, if he doesn't have a nice release on his fastball, he's not ready for that yet.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so, you know, it's common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Are there certain counts that are better to throw like a curveball out of the zone, in the zone? And then there's other counts where you want to throw it kind of in the zone
And have it come out.
and get it out so it's swinging,
Right.
you know.
Right. I think that fastball strike one. Okay.
Right.
That's gotta be in
Then
the
that makes everything else.
That makes everything else work, you know. But and then you want the breaking ball to turn the corner. All right. And then what you want, it's like Smoltzy used to drive me crazy. He'd give up 0-2 breaking ball hits, you know. And I'd go, what are you trying to do with that breaking ball? He said, well, I'm trying to bounce it. I said, don't try to bounce it. You're slow, your arm speed down, making sure you don't. And I said, that's when you're going to make the mistake. So just go ahead and throw it.
Right.
And let the break take care of itself.
Right.
You know? So, but there was guys early in the count, like a dead red guy, you know, and you want to, you know, throw a breaking ball, you know, it's a good time to do it, or behind in the count.
Yeah, because he's looking dead red. Just to get me over curveball, if you can get me over, strike one.
Yeah. And the thing is, the smaller breaking ball is your get me over ball.
Right.
See what I mean?
Right.
Your smaller breaking ball is your get me over pitch. Now, once you're ahead in the count, there's no such thing as a get me over breaking ball anymore. But we learned that a slider strike or a cutter strike went further than any pitch in the game, as far as guys smoking them out of the ballpark. You know.
Right.
So anyway, so you had to, if you wanted to start a guy off with a breaking ball, that's fine. But you know, that's your smaller breaking ball. I particularly didn't care if they started off a guy with a breaking ball. We always felt that if the guy was dead red on the first pitch, if you threw a fastball down the way and you located it, it didn't matter.
Right.
You know, then you followed suit with your other stuff. But, you know, it's like guys now, in other words, Greg Maddux used to tell me, Leo, the most vulnerable count a hitter has is no balls and 2 strikes. I'm going to take him out immediately. So he says, you go tell Bobby Cox I'm going to give up a lot of 0-2 hits.
Right.
And I said, well, you know, explain that to me first before I go tell him. You know, and so he told me that. So I went to Bobby and I said, hey, Bobby, I said, Mad Dog said he's going to give up a lot of 0-2 hits. He goes, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I said, well, he says the most vulnerable count a hitter can have is no balls and 2 strikes. I'm going to take him out immediately. And Bobby looked at me and he goes, well, Leo, he said, that's what separates mediocrity from greatness.
That's right.
You know,
Wow.
so you
Well,
know,
they're more of a defensive swing.
absolutely.
0-2, you're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't really know what's coming.
No, and you know what? If it was today's game, it'd strike out more hitters because they don't shorten it up to make contact. But so those are examples. Now there's all kinds of different. John Rocker, all right. You would not think that this guy just threw this hard and this and that. No, he didn't. John Rocker had a controlled breaking ball and a bigger breaking ball.
That's right.
And nobody even talks about that.
Right.
You know, and he knew what to do with it, and he knew what counts he wanted to do with it in. A lot of times, if he got behind in the count, he would throw not the get me over breaking ball, whatever, and he knew how to do that.
Right.
And so, therefore, there was a misconception on his part. But you know, I heard something interesting today too. Coming in, Hub and I were talking about it. I listened to the interview with Wade Boggs. And they asked him how come he walked 100 times every year, yet he hit 320 and had led the league in all these hits and all this thing. He says, I took 2-0. And I'd never heard that before. I took all my 2-0 pitches I took. He said, because the odds were that the pitcher wasn't, he wasn't going to. He said, I just kept raising the percentages that he was going to walk me, And I sat there going, it was amazing. And so Don Mattingly asked him one time, he said, I only walk 30 times a year. He goes, how do you get the guys to, how you get to walk so much? He goes, I take 2-0 pitches. Mattingly goes, what? He goes, I take 2-0 pitches. So he said Mattingly started doing it. He walked 80 times and still hit 320.
Right.
So, these are different approaches, different adjustments from arm angles to overhand to
Right.
philosophies to changing speeds and how fast that evolution I really started picking up the game mid-50s.
Yeah.
Mid-50s. And I remember Don Larson pitching his perfect game in the World Series. And then I started watching, as far as the Braves beating the Yankees in 57 and so on and so forth. But I got to a point where I was watching pitchers' deliveries, and all of us idolize guys, right? Well, it got to a point where you could mimic any pitcher's delivery that you wanted.
That's right.
Yeah. And so therefore, I'm sure as each generation went forward, people were copying the same things, and kids were doing the same things and trying to, throw like their heroes or play second base like their heroes or, hit like their heroes. So, the time frame on that, I don't think it's overnight, but it takes a while, but it turned out pretty good.
Well, the movement was the first part of the pitching change.
Right.
But now the other part is speed separation.
Right.
The changeup became a part of the game.
You ain't a kidding.
And
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
That is huge because, hitting is timing. And what your job as a pitcher to do, throw off that timing.
You know what they used to call those pitches? Slow balls.
Slow balls?
That's what they called the changeup. Instead of it being a changeup,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw him
That's pretty cool.
a slow ball.
Yeah, I'm going to throw him a slow ball.
You always talk about push throttle.
And pull throttle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the
Slow balls,
over time it split into different. So like he said, the early version was slow ball, and then it went into a straight change, circle change, and what was called a Vulcan, which was just a palm ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Variation.
Vulcan too was as you spread your fingers and put your thumb up to the side, or the Vulcan was in between these two fingers right here.
Who was the pitcher we had?
We had one, and now I'm having a senior moment.
Right-handed pitcher, and he threw the ball like
Yeah.
this. I don't know how you.
And it was the
control
Vulcan.
That.
I don't know how he did it. I sure y'all didn't teach it
That's
to
why they
him.
call
I
it
don't know.
Vulcan.
He taught it to me.
Live long and prosper.
Yes, all exactly.
I mean-
Star Trek, yeah.
How
Spock.
he had to have
How do
long
you
fingers. I mean, how do you get a ball?
Yeah, but
Let
he
me tell
threw
you
it.
something, though. Let me tell you something, though. That long finger stuff is kind of a fallacy, too. If you
Really?
saw guys' fingers that were great pitchers, Maddox had small fingers.
Yeah, and he could manipulate.
And,
that.
I mean, that's all. Oh, he's got big fingers. Then he can't pitch. I mean, come on. This is something that, as a coach, you look at an individual. Number one, you don't clone them. Okay.
Right.
Number two,
Good.
if they show you that they're perfectly fine as far as their effectiveness, the
what
best
they're
thing to
doing.
do is leave him alone.
Mm.
Overcoaching hurts more guys than anything.
Yeah.
No question
We
about
always
it.
We
talk
always
about
talk about that. He's like,
Gee.
dude, your talent
Overcoach.
gets you to the bigs. Sometimes you can ruin a guy by trying to change.
Absolutely. I
everything.
saw managers and coaches do that in the minor leagues, and I went, you got to be kidding me. I'm not going to name any names, but I could put them out there real quick. And then the other thing was that people would say, what did you teach Steve Avery? 21 years old, MVP of the NLCS, 18-game winner. I said, nothing. They said, nothing. I said, no, nothing. I said, what he had when he got here was perfectly fine. It was
Right.
my job to see that he kept it.
That's right.
Right.
That's
you don't
all.
Change it.
You don't change it.
He had that.
Yeah,
and
but he
that.
trusted a changeup, as we're talking about, Hub.
Right.
He trusted a changeup at a very young age.
Right.
A lot of pitchers, when they sign out of high school
Right.
and they throw hard, they don't trust the changeup because you know why?
They don't need
And
it.
number one, you're right. They don't need it. Number two, when they get to the minor leagues and they throw a changeup, they're going to be
get rocked.
second guessed. Oh, how can you throw him a changeup? Yeah, you throw 90 miles an hour.
That's right.
And you know what? So now the pitcher's going to say, well, I ain't throwing a changeup. I don't want to get my butt chewed out. I mean,
Right. But that's the first thing I think a starter has to
Have.
You can't just be a starter with two pitches.
No.
Not too many guys.
not too many.
You got to have the third.
Right.
Nolan Ryan had fastball, curveball. When he came up with changeup, it was
Mhm.
like, and maybe, I'm not going to say it.
No, I know.
Scuffball.
Yeah. No.
With Mike Scott.
the Astros didn't do any of that.
No. But,
No,
but when he came up with that, he became
Oh, yeah.
Wink.
You know what we used to say? If you got two pitches going, probably win. If you got three pitches going, you're going to throw a shutout.
right.
Get narrowed down to one, you're going to lose. If you go 2-to-1 ratio, strikes to balls with your fastball, you're going to have 3 up, 3 down innings. If that gets to 60-40, you're not going to have 3 up, 3 down innings.
Wow.
So you simplify this thing, I mean,
The number. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, come on, you don't need a propeller head to tell you that.
Remember Pete talked about how he only had essentially he had to relearn how to pitch
Yes.
because he got away with fastball for so long.
Sure,
He had to reteach himself
right.
how to change speeds and to throw certain pitches so that
Right. Well, and for these people out there, these coaches out there, when you start teaching somebody a straight change, it's the least amount you can take off and still be effective.
Right.
Because that way, you're going to telegraph a straight change. You're going to add a little body English. You're going to slow down. And here's what you tell somebody: if your butt goes down lower on a straight change, that straight change has got to come up. And if your butt stays up, and you don't try to take a lot off of it, the straight change is going to go down.
Right.
You know,
Really?
so and then don't try to take anything off of it. One guy said, and a smart pitching coach, Johnny Sain, greatest pitching coach in the history of baseball, and I think should be in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. He said, and he's the one that talked about the least amount you can take off and still be effective. And he used to love to watch Glavine pitch. He said he'd put that ball on a string out there, Leo, and then he'd go boop and pull it back before and then the hitter swung.
Right.
And all these types of things that go on.
Does that have to do with? Can you do that with the way you grip it?
Sure.
Whether it's out in your fingertips
Right.
or back or.
All the great change-ups that I saw that was out on your fingertips. In other words, you wanted them come. A circle change or a straight change, it's the same thing. It's just a different grip.
Right.
Also, if you had a split and you moved your thumb up to the side of the ball, it became slower.
Really?
So therefore, a lot of guys use that as an off-speed pitch instead of a split with your thumb underneath.
Yeah.
If you moved it up to the side, you couldn't throw it as hard,
Yeah.
but you still maintained your same arm
But
action.
you had the speed separation, which.
You had the speed separation, right?
Right.
Huh.
Right. And so and then the other one was, I used to go up to a pitcher and I'd say, okay, throw me this fastball and put the extra on it. Boom. All right. Now throw me this fastball and don't put the extra on it. Boom. There was a great straight change because they didn't think about it. They didn't try to do anything.
Right.
But then a lot of times when they get in the game, trusting that is easier said than done,
Yeah, Well.
So all different ways to do things as far as not cloning pitchers, not cloning deliveries.
Right.
and not over coaching.
Yeah.
We've talked about different parts of the changeup, but what makes it, in simple terms, elite? Is it the grip comfort, the arm speed, location, the movement?
Number one is you're talking straight change. So the pitcher will say to you when you first start throwing, well, it didn't move. I said, we're talking about a straight change. I said, if you try to make it move, you're going to ruin it,
Right.
or you upgrade the chance of hurting your arm. So why don't we do this? We're thinking straight change. Now, if you get some movement, it's a plus.
Right.
But if you don't, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
It's
Because
it's still
pulled
the
back.
straight change.
Right.
You know, so you just work off that, you know, and then Mike Remlinger, I mean, he resigned, 4 years with us as a left-handed setup guy, and we didn't care if we brought in a right-hander.
That's right.
Because he started throwing that straight change. But that straight change was like we talked earlier, 87 miles an hour.
Right.
But anyway, so there's different ways to look at things, but the bottom line is you can't use more body English on a straight change. In other words,
Right.
you're trying to make it
Right.
look like you're going to throw the heck out of it. And then you slow it down, and all of a sudden, the hitter's going to read it.
That's right.
You're going to give it away.
Telegraph it.
Yeah, you're going to telegraph it.
So the arm speed has to be the same.
Definite. Absolutely, definitely
Look
the same.
like a fastball. Oh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
as a hitter.
Yeah. And how do you get that done? The least amount you can take off and still be effective. Maintains arm speed, maintains the same delivery, maintains everything the same, because you're not trying to take something off of it. You're letting the grip take care of itself.
Manipulate the ball.
And don't try to manipulate it by turning this thing over or turning that over or
Right.
whatever, because you know what? That'll drive you crazy. I mean,
Right.
it'll move different all the time.
Right.
And we're talking about
Yeah.
spins. You want the same spin on the pitch all the time,
Right.
Right.
not something different, because they can read that.
Right.
Hitter can read it.
Right.
And so you develop that maybe from just warming up or side sessions.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah. So you added you and in the minor leagues, when you knew the kid needed a straight change, you started working on it,
That's right.
But
Yeah.
the thing is now they say, well, you got to throw this many straight changes on the percentage. You got to throw this many straight changes. No.
The hitter tells you when to
I
throw
mean,
it, right?
yeah, absolutely. If he's turning on your butt,
Yeah.
yeah, he's on you. If he's
throw a-
on your fastball,
You throw
if
a
you
good
can't read
fastball
that,
and he pulls it past the third base coach,
absolutely.
he's susceptible.
Oh, yes. We would love to. That's why we'd love to see pull hitters.
That's
The
right.
guys that hurt us, Hub, as you well know, would be somebody that used the whole field or went opposite way,
Right.
And the Marlins were the one team that could do that to Glavin, but nobody else tried to do it. We were perfectly fine with that,
Right.
So interesting.
Tommy, you knew he was going to throw a changeup, but you couldn't hit it still
That what?
because it just looked like a fastball.
Right. Oh, you know what? I watched every once in a while. I watch one of the games, and you couldn't tell with Glavin. You couldn't tell at all whether he was throwing a changeup or not. And Ray Knight came over to me when he used to manage Cincinnati. He goes, Leo, he said, it's the damnedest thing. I said, what's that? He goes, we know where he's going to be, and we still can't do anything about it. That's how good Tommy was. That's why he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, like today's pitchers, for example, do you think they chase velocity way too hard, that they skip the craft of a real changeup?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They chase velocity too hard because of the way they're brought up now with travel baseball.
Yeah.
And a lot of the coaches aren't qualified to teach, and then they run into all these other things. Here's one thing. I talked to a particular buddy of mine who pitched 17 years in the big leagues, and now he works for he's an agent, and he was representing an individual. And when he was in the San Diego Padres organization, this individual was told he was not happy with how he was being brought along. Pitch 6 innings. If you pitch 6 innings or maybe a little more, you were only allowed to throw 4 innings in your next start. In between starts, you did not pick up a baseball for 2 days. And then you threw live hitting. Then you took a day off and pitched. Now, what in the world
Yeah.
And you know what? That's not him. Most guys, that's part of the system now.
That's right.
You know, that's part of the system, which is an absolute joke. But, you know, what do we know? Merker said, talked to a high, he goes, I pitched 17 years in the big leagues. You don't want to listen? And basically didn't want to listen. So, and that was a baseball executive that I'm talking about, not the pitcher. And,
Propeller head.
yeah, the propeller heads.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, come on. You know, it's like you have to simplify this game. Whether you're hitting or you're pitching or you're playing defense, you have to simplify this game. And with all the things that go on now, no wonder a pitcher has 90 pitches after 4 1/3 innings. I said, he's all over the place. They're
That's
trying
right.
to do so many different things with so many different pitches.
Right.
And it's hard for
That's
me to
the
watch.
guys with 11 pitches.
Yeah, it's a guy with 11 pitches. 11 pitches. And, you know, then you hear somebody on TV, you know, that sits there and said, well, he's got 11 pitches. And I got to turn the channel. You know what my wife tells me? She'll hear me say a cuss word in the other room. What are you watching that for? All that does is make you angry. I said, I need an adrenaline rush. Then I start rocking. Then I start, you know.
Well,
But anyway.
I saw it my last years in the minor leagues. Now, I'm not a pitching guy, but I saw side sessions. And to me, that's where their pitch counts go up because they're just trying to throw it as hard as they can.
Yeah.
What was my spin rate? That was this. Yeah, my spin rate was really good, but you didn't throw it over the plate.
Didn't throw it over the plate.
And then when you get in the game,
Same thing.
You can't throw strikes.
What was my horizontal and what was my vert?
I threw that one 100 miles an hour. Yeah, for ball 4.
Yep.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, nice going.
Yeah.
What's your number one philosophy? Go strike.
Go strike one to make these things work.
Right.
Yep.
And then you can work with all this other stuff we're talking about, all the other pitches.
Absolutely.
And,
No question about it.
And it works. And I think it would eliminate, I told you before, injuries to pitcher.
No question.
We tried a 6 innings pitch. Now you can't pitch but 4 innings.
Come on. The greatest teacher a pitcher has is innings pitched.
Yep.
And baseball is taking away
Innings pitch.
innings pitched.
Yep.
You see less and less starters with quality starts these days.
Quality
Yeah.
starts. 4.50
Yeah.
ERA is a quality start. Come on.
Again, we take better care of pitchers' arms, so they say, and yet we have
More injuries.
More injuries.
More injuries. Absolutely.
Because they don't throw enough.
No.
Under controlled.
Effort.
Right.
The effort is the key.
From from the mound.
Yes, 60 feet 6 inches going downhill to a catcher because that's where you make your living.
That's where you make your living.
Yep.
And I took a big gamble, Hub, and it turned out when I was in the minor leagues, there was 4-man rotations prior to my becoming a minor league pitching coach. And you pitch, you took a day off, you throw it aside, you took a day off, and you pitched. Okay.
Right.
Well, it worked fine, and I pitched in 4-man rotations when I was in the minor leagues, and I loved it because it didn't give you time. You didn't give you time to think too much. You had to get ready for your next start. Well, then the baseball world went to a 5-man rotation in order to give the pitcher an extra day's rest. So my wheels started turning. This was in early 80s, and I said, you know what? I think that's too much rest. I'm going to do it twice in between and see what happens. Because at the time, I didn't have to ask nobody if I could do it or not.
Right.
You were paid to take care of that.
Those are great days, weren't they?
Yes. No.
As a coach.
Yeah, as a coach. Yeah, because Hank says, "There's your pitchers. Do what you want with them. That's what I hired you for."
That's
well,
right.
Bobby Cox told me the same thing when I got to Atlanta.
Right.
There's your pitchers. Take care of them. I don't care what else you do.
That's called trust.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, you know what? It worked like a charm. Now, I put my neck out on the line because if guys would have broke down, I was gone. Well, if Mazzone had him throw it twice, what's he? And it worked. But I had confidence in it that it was going to work if I controlled the effort.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it if they were airing that thing out.
Right.
And you know what? The pitchers loved it. All of a sudden, I was going through years, wherever level I was at, nobody was getting a sore arm. And then
Shocker.
that's what got me to the big leagues was, when they had those meetings that one pitching coach stood up and said, well, as much as Leo has these guys throw, they won't have nothing left in August. And so I said, can I say something? And they said, yeah. They go ahead. I said, well, if they don't, what do you do when I have the pitcher on the mound the second time? He goes, well, we play flat-footed throwing in the outfield. I said, why don't you explain the difference to me between flat-footed throwing and going downhill to a catcher where you make your living at 60 feet, 6 inches? He goes, they'll have a tendency to throw too hard. And I said, well, that's what they pay you for, is to control the effort.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
That's
Well, guess
right.
what? That's what Bobby said. Okay, Leo's program's replaced. But what happened was Jim Beecham and Hank Aaron stood up and said, we don't know. We know one thing, Bobby. And they said, what's that? Wherever Leo is as a pitching coach,
Everybody's
our
healthy.
guys don't get sore arms.
Right.
And that happened
There you
for
go.
my whole career, basically. That
Yep.
we couldn't have done all we did if those guys couldn't go to the post.
Yeah.
What's your goal this year, Leo? What's your goal this year? My goal this year is for everybody to make their starts. I said, if we do that,
be
we're
fine.
in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, now it's complete opposite. It's complete opposite. But if that's the way they want to do it, knock
Yeah.
yourself out
Yeah, the game's changed a little bit.
a little bit.
Speaking of change, now we get to a pitch that changed a lot of careers: the slider, and then later on the cutter.
Right. Now, the slider is what Hub calls the controlled breaking ball. But now now that slider, they break them a little bigger now. I mean,
Right.
but once again, it gets back to the difference how you build a small break into a bigger break.
Big break.
Right.
Yeah. So now, in other words, and I learned the term over the years, a short curve. You know how I learned that?
Yeah.
There was another organization, and I had a buddy of mine come over from the Mets organization. He said, Leo, our pitchers aren't allowed to throw a slider in the minor leagues because they might hurt their arm.
Mm.
I said, really? He says, you teach a slider? I said, of course I do. He said, how you get away with it? I said, call it a short curve. They'll say that's fine. Guess what?
It worked.
It worked. He said, I said, you guys throwing your slider? He goes, no, we're throwing a short curve, Leo. That's okay.
There you go.
See what I mean? Come on,
Well,
you know.
You know what? I struggled with that as a coach in the minor leagues when I first started coaching. You'd draft this kid number 2. Fastball, got a nasty slider.
Mm-hmm.
They'd take that slider away,
Mm-hmm.
which is the reason he got drafted number 2,
Mm-hmm.
because it was filthy. And we try to give him that. Now he gets rocked.
No,
And they took it away because they said it was going to hurt his arm. And I'm like, wow, you just signed him number 2, gave him all that money, and now you're taking away his
bullets
out
Mhm.
pitch. That's right. You're taking bullets out of his.
Mhm. Out of his armor.
That's right.
Well,
And now he goes out there with less confidence.
because he doesn't have that pitch to go to. So what's he going to do? He's going to overthrow the other pitches, which raises the risk of a sore arm.
Right.
Yes.
You know? Oh, you don't let him throw this many sliders. I said he's got a good slider. Leave him alone. You know. But I had that happened to one of the pitchers in the minor leagues where they said, we want you to watch this guy throw. I said, okay. Fastball, breaking ball, split. 18 years old, out of high school. I said, he looks great. He goes, well, we're not going to let him throw a split. I said, why not? Well, you know, he's only 18 and we're waiting for his arm to da-da-da-da. They said, what do you think of that? I said, well, I don't think it's a very good idea myself. They said, why is that? I said, well, you're going to take away one of his bullets. I said, now he's going to go out there and face the better hitters that he's ever faced in his life.
Yep.
I said, and now you take away a bullet. What's he going to do with the other 2 pitches? He's going to overwork them. He's going to overextend them. He's going to over effort. He's going to, you know. I said, you know what you're doing? You're defeating. You're raising the risk of what you're trying to eliminate.
Right.
You let him have his pitches.
Right.
You know, you let him have them.
Yeah.
Oh, he can't throw this, or he can. Yes, you can. You know, it's just a coach protecting his butt.
Right.
So moving into these pitches, no. Moving in, it kind of piggybacks off what you're saying. So moving into these pitches that changed a lot of careers, but so the slider was introduced early to mid 1900s, and then obviously widespread by mid century. Then you've got your sinker 2-seamer. Slider is often described as kind of living between a curveball and a fastball.
Mm-hmm.
Sinker 2-seam and
Ground balls?
the heavy ball
Oh, yeah.
concept was early 1900s, a little bit more codified later in the 19th century or the 1900s. Obviously, the movement was designed to create a weak contact, a lot of ground balls, and then the
Cutter?
two seam.
Oh, two-seamer.
Yeah, your two seamer, your
Movement.
cutters. Yeah. So when did you personally feel that the slider specifically became a non-negotiable in the big leagues? And was like a staple pitch outside of most people think it fastball, changeup.
No, the slider is a hard breaking ball. Okay. And the slider is something that it comes in. I mean, it's hard. You know, it's now they said when the slider was first brought in, well, it breaks, but it's the same velocity as a fastball. It's not correct. A slider is going to be at least 3 miles an hour slower.
Right.
You know, and a cutter is too. Because you're changing the spin, you're changing the direction.
Right.
So, you know, it's going to be a 3 mile an hour difference at least, you know. But that bottom line is when guys are sitting dead red, that slider, you know. Now, if you're talking John Smoltz' slider, that's a swing and a miss.
That's right.
You talk a couple of other sliders, those are pitches that get you off the fastball. So it depends on whose slider you're talking about.
Right.
Now, here's where the cutter came into play that I learned. What was the year that Quest Tech came into play, Rob? We were there in the big leagues.
Yeah.
The Quest Tech came in, and they made Maddox and Glavine the poster boys of Quest Techs because they were getting the corners.
Right.
Or the edge of the corners, as they say.
Yeah.
All they were getting was the width of the ball off the corners.
Yeah.
So
They
anyway,
could hit their spots.
Yeah, because they could hit because of control.
That's right.
And what did we used to say? Number 1 is command. Number 2 is change of speeds. Number 3 is velocity.
Right.
Okay? But anyway, getting off the thing here. Okay, Quest Tech comes into play. What did that do? Brought the strike zone in. So now guys could lean out and try to cover the outside corner, you know, which was the one pitch that if you asked the late, great Eddie Matthews, if you wanted to practice hitting the down and away strike, he said, you're not very smart. He said, there won't be a game of baseball if you practice that.
Right.
Practice where you can hit the damn thing.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, the cutter came into play to open that down and away strike back up.
Right.
And then that's when then you learned that a cutter was a pitch that if you're teaching a pitcher a cutter, the first thing you want to do is if you're right-handed, you want him to throw it to a left-handed hitter.
Right.
If you're left-handed, you want him to throw it to a right-handed hitter.
Right.
And you want to teach them how to break it at the hitter's hands. This is not a ball that goes down and in.
Right.
Right.
You know, if a cutter rolls, you know where it rolls to? The seats. That's where it rolls to, the seats.
right.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's got to be on a level plane.
Right.
Now, the really good cutters, the last thing that comes off that ball is your index finger, not your middle finger, your index finger. So if you're going to cut the ball and go down through it, that should be the last thing that touches your hand, touches the ball. Now, if you do this, if you roll over a cutter, that's a hanger.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
Okay, because you want it to break vertically. So a cutter is used, and Maddox used this. You know, I mean, but all pitchers, a cutter was used to go in on their hands, and then they'd have to fight the pitch off. And a lot of times, a cutter was hit in the air, and it used to be they get so many blue pits off that pitch. You know, and
Right.
you know, well, he blooped it in. Well, I said, well, you know, cutter in on the hands,
Right.
et cetera. But it's still, that's when the cutter became very popular, you know, and that was in the 90s when Quest Tech came into play. So now everybody throws a cutter. They even throw front door cutters that are, you know, that's another pitch now. Front door cutter, back, you know, stuff like that.
One of the greatest relievers of all time,
Mariano Rivera.
cutter.
Yeah.
As he got beat on a blue pit in Arizona.
Yes, he did.
He jammed
Yep.
Gonzalez,
Mm-hmm.
but he fought it off.
Let
and
me
it
tell
was
you
like,
something.
"Yep."
He had one pitch. That was a cutter, but you know what? He had great control of that cutter.
That's right.
He could move it in, move it out, move it up, move it down. I mean, it was like he had one pitch, but he had three.
Oh, yeah.
You know, basically off the same pitch.
Right.
But man, I used to see some guys. I think it was Klesko. We were in the World Series. And Klesko was up at the plate, and they broke it. First pitch, Mariano broke his bat, and he come back to the dugout. You know, he's like, I'm going to get down. And we're sitting there, you know, rolling our eyes. And next pitch, he broke his bat again. Another bat.
I saw that video about a week ago. He broke like 3 or 4 bats.
Yeah, then he broke his bat again. Then the third time, he got him in on the handle. He broke his bat and carried the handle to first base. And we're losing the game, and we're trying not to laugh in the dugout, you know.
All y'all are
Oh,
laughing.
my golly, you know, but. No, he was great, but he
Right.
one pitch, you know, one pitch.
So that
You can do that as a
Closer.
closer.
Yeah. You can't do it as a starter.
Right. Bruce Sutter.
Ooh. That's when the split came in. The split came into play. The Elroy faced years ago with the Pirates, 1960, threw a fork ball, and he was 17-1. But the fork ball, your fingers were spread a lot further.
Right.
Okay, so when I went to Suter, he says, Leo, here's what you do. You get a 2-seam fastball. Throw a 2-seam fastball. Throw another 2-seam fastball. Now spread your fingers a little bit, throw a 2-seam fastball. Now spread them a little further and throw a 2-seam fastball. When the ball starts to do something, that's how far you spread. So naturally, when you're going across a 2-seam fastball and you spread, all the great splits that I saw in my career weren't split very far at all. They were just a little outside the 2 seams.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't like they were jammed, and
Right.
float. You didn't want it to float.
Right.
You wanted it to come in, look like a fastball, and have a small break.
Right.
Yeah, he talked about Smoltzy's. Like it rolled to the table
Yeah.
and then
Boom. It was gone.
yeah.
And it looked like a fastball all the way to the end. And
You know
then
that's the first pitch in the minor leagues before I release a kid that's got a pretty good arm. You know, he might be throwing 93, but he's getting whacked.
Yeah.
That's the first pitch I would.
Sure.
With KC, I saw a couple kids. They could put 2 baseballs in between their fingers. And I'm like, don't release that kid until you see if he can
do it.
Because it's a game changer.
Yes, it is.
Well, Bill Stewart.
Yeah.
Bill Stewart.
No, Stewart, the guy with the A's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played with him.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, your
he got
senior moment.
I know.
Rod? No, not Rod. Not Rod Stewart. He's a singer.
Rod
Yeah,
Stewart.
Rod Stewart's a
I was
singer.
like, no.
Dave
Dave
Stewart.
Dave
There.
Stewart.
Anyway,
Yeah.
he got released.
Took us a minute. We got there.
He got released 3 times.
Yeah. Split.
Came up with that. Rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's a game changer.
Yes, it is. It
If you can throw it and you know.
That's the closest thing. They outlawed the spitball. Now, you know, I don't know what year they outlawed that.
I'm not sure.
No. But in 1957.
I don't know. I played behind a guy that still threw it.
Well, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the outlaw, that doesn't mean the guys don't throw it. In 1957, Lou Burdett beat the Yankees for the 7th game of the World Series. He told me he didn't throw anything but a spitter on every pitch.
Oh.
He said he didn't even have a sign with the catcher.
He just
Threw all spitballs.
Here it is.
And here it is. And he just shut them out.
Yep.
You know, and so I had him teach me how to do it, you know. So I saw how to do it. And, you know, you don't grip any seams on the ball. And anyway, so Maddox and I used to talk about it. And then Maddox would go, is anybody looking, Leo? And I said, yeah, they got some scouts checking you out. And so he would spit on his fingers. And it was trying to make the scout believe that he was throwing a spitter. And he says, I give him something to think about. He never did throw a spitter. He just had great movement.
Way ahead of the game.
Way ahead of
Wasn't
the Yeah.
He's
way ahead
thinking
of the
about,
game.
hey,
they're watching me.
I'm
Absolutely.
going to do this.
Yeah.
Give him something else.
Give him something. Yeah.
Instead of just thinking about he's going to throw strikes.
Sure.
He's a
gonna-
grandmaster in chess. I guarantee that man plays chess. He has to play chess.
He's
Well, and you look at it now. The dumbest question I ever get is, could your guys do that now the way the game is played? I said, come on.
Your
I said,
guys would dominate.
oh my God, they would, it would be over. I mean, there'd
Yeah.
be no chance,
right.
and, but anyway, when you're talking, it's interesting in talking about the evolution of pitching and how it works. But, I studied it from a very young age. So, I mean, even in the minor leagues when I was pitching, and me and Gary Lavelle were together, a left-handed pitcher with the Giants.
Right.
And, he talked like this. Hey, Leo. He's from Allentown, Pennsylvania. He goes, hey, Leo. He says, I'm having all kinds of problems with my slider. Well, here I am competing with him, trying to get to the big leagues, and I'm helping him with his slider. And that's when I was in Double-A. So, anyway.
He was pretty nasty.
Oh, my. He got to the big leagues, and you know what? He has the record for left-handed saves with the Giants.
Yep.
Left-handed pitcher. And he started in the minor leagues. And you know what? In the minor leagues, he would worry himself to death in between starts, drive himself crazy. So when he became a reliever, he came to the ballpark not knowing if he was going to pitch or not.
Right.
He was perfectly fine.
I'm okay.
I think Wohlers went through that a little bit too in his career.
Right.
But then when you were a reliever, when I was coming in, that means you weren't good enough to start. Well, that's all changed now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed dramatically. We wanted our. How about this though? How can you use 41 pitchers in a season? Major league teams last year had teams use 41 different starters.
Huh?
They had an average around 30 different pitchers on a team. Now, I mean,
Oh,
Duh.
yeah, bringing guys up.
check that out, make sure I'm accurate, but I bet I'm darn close.
I
was
actually
told
think
that.
the Braves used the most
Huh?
pitchers. I think the Braves tied for the most
They
pitchers
were up
used
there
last year.
Yeah. Well, their whole
The Braves
rotation went
utilized
down.
46 different pitchers, matching Major League Baseball record for the most pitchers used by a single team in a season.
There you
I think
go.
Michael was talking about how they would bring some guys up, see what he's got, put him back down, bring a few more guys up.
19 different starters.
19 different starters and 40-some pitchers.
That's nuts.
Different pitchers, I should say.
So
A lot of that has to do with pitch counts and
Oh,
pitching.
yeah, I
You
know.
pitch 6 innings.
Well,
now I gotta say-
yeah. Or he pitched 2 days in a row. Let's send him down
Right.
and then bring in a fresh arm. You know what? Union needs to do something about that. Anyway, it's you're costing people time.
Yeah.
Well, you and Bobby had it right. I mean, you had a 6th inning guy. You had a 7th inning guy. You had a double play guy.
Yeah,
Grabowski.
yeah,
We talking about heavy ball
yeah.
and slider.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to bunt the guys over. 2nd and 3rd, we walk the 3rd hitter, get to the 4th hitter, who's a double play guy, bring in Grabowski.
Mm-hmm. Ground ball.
Heavy ball.
Now, if some of these pitchers that they worked with, other organizations didn't like them.
Yeah.
They didn't like a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But that's Bobby's strategy, and
They were
and
specially
the
pitching.
matchups. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, and he was way ahead of the game as far as that goes.
And you know what I loved about it? They get him in. Now he's out.
Yeah.
Now you're 8th inning guy. And you look at the end of the year, there's so many guys just because you get them in and out. You look at their stats, you say, man, what a great year.
Yeah.
Bobby made it, and you made a lot of those
Well, I mean,
guys.
Bobby was the one that made the decision.
Yeah, but he asked you.
But
for
Reitsma.
Chris,
What he was in 80. Chris Reitsma. He was in 80-some games, and he did great.
There's a guy with the changeup.
There you go. He had a great changeup.
Oh, he had a guy.
Chris Hammond had a great change.
You could swing at it 3 times.
I was watching a cartoon the other day, and it was on Turner Classic, and it was Bugs Bunny.
I think I've seen that. I've seen
When
that.
and he's pitching and changing speeds and making those big bombers look sick.
Yeah.
One,
And
two,
what
three,
did our guys used to call pitches? And that was a Bugs Bunny pitch.
That was a Bugs Bunny.
That was a Bugs Bunny pitch.
Love it.
And
all those guys.
Yeah.
Remlinger, Hammond, Reitsma,
Yeah.
all those guys.
Rudy
had-
Cian is.
Rudy,
Yeah.
you just wouldn't sit next to him.
No.
He might-
I said, Rudy, if we get in a team fight, I'm getting right behind you.
Yep.
You know.
He was ready.
Yeah, he was.
Probably the most intense guy
Yeah,
I've been around.
yeah. Well, I remember one time though we were in L.A. and I said, Rudy, you got things under control down here? He goes, yeah. I said, I got 4 of my guys right there in those seats up there. If they start giving us any crap, you know, and from Compton, California, I think, you know, or it was. But anyway, it was, and you know, it's like when you had Jay Howell and Steve Bedrosian and Mike Bilecki, all of them.
Yep.
Oh, they're done. Their careers are over. No, they weren't.
No, you just
Not at all. Absolutely.
That's where you put them. Where you put them in the right roles.
Sure.
you know,
Absolutely.
and used them correctly, and then you got them out.
Yeah.
And then you brought in another guy.
Yeah.
And
Well, and here, you know, I could go to a bunch of big league coaches right now, and I know for sure college and travel ball coaches. And I go to them and I'll say, what's your max out inning? They go, what? So what's his max out inning? What do you think his max out inning is? What do you use that when the game starts? What are you talking about? You know, well, a max out inning is Bobby Cox says, Leo, let me know when a pitcher's going to max out his effort.
right.
So when he maxes out his effort, we're going to have a reliever ready. He's coming out of the game regardless of pitch count.
Yeah. Because
Leo, is he going to max out his effort? Nope, he's still in normal mode.
Right.
Well, then we're going to let him hit, and
keep
it doesn't matter what the pitch count is.
Right.
Right.
Now, how?
Well, now it's.
Oh,
It's
yeah. It's
I don't know who came up with 100 pitches.
I think it was that James, the guy, you know, the
Bill James,
Bill James or something. I think is what it was.
the
I don't-
analytic guy.
Yeah. I don't know where they got it either.
Well, give it a second. Louis will
Well,
find
you know
that.
what? And in the minor leagues, when the guys come out of spring training, they got like 60 pitches.
yeah.
So 3 innings,
Yeah.
you abuse your bullpen.
Oh, it's gonna
with-
you're gonna
with that
blow it
guy.
up.
Number one, they're not used to pitching 3 innings
No.
straight in spring training because they roll innings. They get in the minor leagues.
Mm-hmm.
You get bases loaded and they say, roll it. They take everybody off the field. And the other team, you know, they never know how to get out of the inning.
Nope.
And that's where the rolls and, you know, starter strategy and, you know, I mean, it's just different.
Well, you know, they've already taken a couple of pitchers out this year with no hitters going. You know,
Because of pitch counts.
yeah, I guess. You know, Merker threw that no hitter in L.A.
Right.
You know, he threw 100. It was his first start of the year in L.A. and he threw 129 pitches. We come in the 6th inning, says, you tired? And I looked at him and said, what are you, nuts? He goes, what do you mean? I said, look up on the scoreboard. Oh, I got a no hitter. Go, yeah.
Let him go.
Oh, I'm not tired no
Yeah.
more.
Did
Let
you
him go.
Yeah.
Did you knock on wood?
Yeah. And he threw a no hitter.
Yeah.
And he only pitched 17 years after that, ladies and gentlemen. Come
Yeah,
on.
Just let him do it.
You know.
And
So
it was Dr. James Andrews, a world-renowned orthopedic surgeon specializing in elbow injuries, who first advocated for it in 1999.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was the magic number, he said.
Oh, boy. You know what?
So we're talking
You
about.
could have a guy
Oh,
throw
go ahead.
40-some pitches and he's done.
Yep.
You could have a guy. Tom Glavine could go into the 9th inning with 117 pitches in Fulton County Stadium on a 100-degree day and be fine.
Right.
So we've talked about the sinker,
Yeah.
2-seam slider. So let's kind of tie all this together, because the way the ball moves is obviously connected to how it comes out of the.
Right.
And he's kind of mentioned arm slot. You kind of mentioned arm slot as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move we're moving from the pitches now to the differences, because it's surprisingly there's quite a few differences in arm slot. Yeah,
Right.
overhand,
Right.
3/4, low 3/4, submarine, stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Your perfect slot, if you had to design a perfect slot, is high 3/4. High 3/4 would be the perfect slot. If you go to an over-exaggerated overhand, that means you have a chance to pinch your shoulder or do something with your shoulder that's not
And
healthy.
blow out your teres minor, which is like the back rotator cuff.
Is that? Oh, thank you. I didn't know what they
Yeah,
call it. Teres minor there.
Yeah.
Thanks, doctor.
So you don't want to hurt
Got-
your teres minor.
Yeah, he has the scrubs to match the knowledge. So yeah.
Wow.
I got to go to work, man. I
Thanks,
got to go to
Doc.
work.
Did you
after
get
this.
that from your mom or dad? Where'd you get that?
I saw
me.
no. I saw it on. I saw it inside a fortune cookie. One day.
Well, anyway, you might hurt that if you're over exaggerated overhand.
Yeah.
If you're depending on your arm slot, it's going to depend on the angle of the pitch. All right.
Right.
For example, Smoltzy was an over-the-top pitcher. Now, one year, I can't remember what year it was, he said, my arm don't hurt when I go down to low three-quarter.
Right. I remember that.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And I said, well, if your arm don't, this is brilliant coaching here. Well, I said, well, then go ahead.
Yeah.
He goes, you think it would work? I said, if you think it'll work, I know it'll work.
Yeah.
So I went to Bobby and I said, Bobby, I got to tell Bobby, you know. And I said, it's told Smoltzy to go down to low three-quarter. Why? He said, his arm don't hurt if it throws a three-quarter. He goes, okay, that's fine, you know.
Right.
So now his first starts against Houston, he practiced it twice in the bullpen. Went to low three-quarter, won 7-1. And Biggio said, we knew he was going to drop down to three-quarter. And I'm going, I wonder how he knew that. We didn't tell anybody that, you know.
Right.
So anyway, anyway, so he did great, but he could not throw a split.
From there.
Now, if you can't throw a split from low three-quarter.
Right.
Right. So he pitches low three-quarter pretty much the rest of the year, 99. Now I remember, because now I remember. Now, and he does extremely well, pitches the whole year. The half of the last couple of months of the year, low three-quarter. We're playing the Yankees in the World Series. We're going down toward the bullpen, and you get to know your pitchers so well that they don't have to say nothing. You can read their face. And I said, Smoltzy. He goes, yeah. I said, you're going back on top, aren't you? He goes, yep, lay low. He said, I need to split for their left-handed hitters.
Mm.
And he says, what do you think? I said, yes, sir. I agree with you 100%. And as a pitching coach, you can't be scared. You can't coach scared.
Right.
I never once thought we were going to have sore arms.
Right.
And now everybody can say, oh, I hope we don't get a sore arm. Oh, don't. I never thought we were going to have them.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And if somebody got one, I was pretty much in shock, you know?
Right.
And so anyway, he lost 3-1, but he struck out 10.
Right.
But to do that,
Right.
it was the angles on the pitches. You can't throw a split down here, but you can throw a slider. Oh, sometimes they call it a sweeper now from down there.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that gave him only 2 pitches. But then he could throw a 2-seamer from down there,
That's
and
right.
every once in a while make the ball sink.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So therefore, he adapted to the different spins on the ball from your
Right.
arm angle.
So the arm slot
The arm
determines
slot,
whether,
I'm saying the arm slot's going to determine it. Now, if you want to find out what a pitcher's arm slot is, you get him out, say you're going to play catch with him in the outfield, whatever. And it could be any age.
Right.
After, I don't believe that you do nothing until they're at least facing other pitchers or 12, 13 years old.
Right.
Otherwise, just let them play and let them do their own thing.
That's right.
And, of course, just let them, and if they're doing fine, leave them alone.
Don't
But anyway,
overcoach.
yeah. So you spread them out flat-footed, and you have them throw the pitch to the receiving partner. Do not move your feet. Now, if you don't move your feet, it's all arm,
Right.
and you'll go to a natural arm slot. So, example, if I got a pitcher on the side, he's having trouble with his arm slot, it's moving on him, I put his back foot on the rubber, spread his feet, now throw it to the catcher without moving your feet. Boom. And I keep doing that a little bit, I said, now, get on the mound. Now we're going to add a leg kick to it.
Right.
Now we're going to add a little. And so you start with no motion to a little motion to more motion. And if you keep the arm slot, then that's how you maintain that arm slot.
Right.
And that's what we used to do
So
to make sure the arm slot was the same.
Some people have this.
Yes.
You're just born.
Yeah.
You're
Avery
here.
was like that. Straight over the top.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the guy from the Giants?
Oh,
Lindstrom.
Lindstrom.
Yeah, he was very much.
Yeah, he very much over there, and he arched his back so far that he was able to bring that. See, you put your arm shot right there, right? Don't arch. Arch.
Right.
Now, when you have the right direction to the plate, your legs take care of the top.
Yeah.
Your bottom half takes care of the top half. So if your alignment to home plate is to whatever area you're going to, you're just taking a straight shot to the target. All right? That eliminates trying to help it over here or dive in over here to get the ball to the area you want to go.
Yeah.
That way, how did Maddox get moving on the pitch? If he didn't have to change nothing. Because as soon as you do this with your upper body or do that with your upper body, that pitch changes.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Because of your
Change.
slot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of your arm slot. So it's a different pitch.
Right.
Yes.
And so all these, you have to take that. Now, how do you find all this out? Well, you sure as hell don't find it out by throwing an iron ball against a wall.
Right.
You don't throw it out by pulling a band.
Right.
Well, you know how you find it out? Go down to the bullpen, under control, and read your spins, read your slot, find out what the ball's doing from where you're unloading. Is taking a straight shot? Everything. When you work with a kid, well, the one thing you want to do, son, is when you lift your leg, step to where you're going.
Right. Don't step this way.
Yeah. And I'm sure whatever position you are, you want to try to step to where you're going. Sometimes I know you can't, but step to where you're going.
Right.
So these are all the net. That goes all the way back to different spins from different slots, and it all makes a complete circle. The circle now is see how hard you can throw it, swing and miss.
Right.
Not contact, swing and miss. We wanted contact on the end or on the handle.
Right.
Best pitch in baseball, first pitch out. One pitch out, I should say. Now it's ball one, ball two, 3-2, 2-2, 98 pitches going into the fifth.
What was Maddox's complete game? Was it 96 pitches?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It'd be lower than that sometimes. He went one time, he went Yankees. I think he went no walks, 11 strikeouts, and only threw like 80 pitches. You know why? What's the most vulnerable count a hitter can have? 0-2. Yep. I'm going to take him out immediately.
Right.
See what I mean?
I'm
get
going
back.
right in.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did, and one time we were in Yankee Stadium and Hirschbeck. Remember, I thought he was the best. John Hirschbeck was the best umpire in baseball when we were in the big leagues.
Yeah.
And Maddox is walking off the mound in the sixth inning in Yankee Stadium, coming toward our dugout, and Hirschbeck meets him on the foul line. And they're talking, I'm going, oh, shit, what happened? And
That's fine.
sorry about that. And anyway, so sitting there, and I said, Mad Dog, what's the deal with that? He goes, he just told me I was as good as advertised. But, those guys.
And he was.
He was.
All those guys were fun.
All of them, yeah. Glavine was stubborn and wouldn't give in. Smoltzy had good stuff and was, and then ended up with great control. And Maddox had pinpoint location and movement and change of speed. So all of them had 3 pitches.
Yep.
Yeah. Not 11 or 12, but 3. And they could command them.
Right.
And in the bullpen, what's the most important hit? What's the most important hitter a pitcher's going to face coming out of the bullpen? The first hitter he faces. He sets the tone
for
everything. So, and then you had your sinker ballers, you had your splits, you had you wanted your closer to have an out pitch. Well, Greg McMichael threw 83 miles an hour and saved 18 games because his out pitch was what? Straight change.
Yep.
So what mattered to you more as a pitching coach throughout your career? And even now you're kind of on the outside looking in.
Sure.
Deception, hiding the ball until the last minute, or repeatable mechanics?
Repeatable mechanics. Because that way you're going to have, if you repeat your mechanics, the pitches are always going to be the same spins.
Right.
Yes, so, sir. And then they're going to spin all the same, In other words, you ever go up to a pitcher and I'll be working the bullpen, that ball cut. I said, did you do that on purpose? No. Well, we got to find out why that ball cut. And when we can do, and if you know how to do it and know when it's going to cut, that's good. But if it's only 50-50, come on. So but I think repeating mechanics is over and over and over again. Now, it's easier to repeat mechanics when you don't try to overpower a pitch.
Right.
You try to overpower a pitch, your mechanics go haywire.
Right.
And so more often, less exertion takes care of that. So, and then,
Side sessions.
Yeah. And then how about
Yep.
this for our relievers? You'll like this, Hub. You know, one time Bedrock had pitched in 6-7 games. He's waiting on me down the bullpen, you know. So here I come walking down the pen. And he goes, I haven't pitched in 7 days. I said, I know. I said, but our starters are doing good right now. And I said, so I'm pretty much happy that you're not, you know. Hell, yeah. I was joking, you know. Anyway, he says, well, I'm going to go up here and throw as hard as I can. I said, well, then we're not going up there. But he come up, you know, and he come up and threw a little bit. I had a front office person come down to the clubhouse, and he goes, I see you out there having Bedrosian throw. I said, yeah. Well, what if you got to use him tonight? I said, that's what we're preparing for.
Right.
He hadn't pitched in 7 days.
Right. And
You gotta warm him
he
up.
wasn't
Yeah.
throwing 100%.
No.
He just
Yeah.
Stay in
Getting
your,
a
stay in your
feel.
cubicle.
Getting a feel for things. Feeling touch.
feeling touch.
So how often did that happen to you where you had people who just assumed that they were
Oh, one
being
scout
abused?
told me, he goes, you still tearing pitchers down, then build them back up? I said, what in the world are you talking about?
I
don't
get
tear
angry
nobody
for you,
down.
just you telling that story.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't tear nobody down. It's a
Yeah.
constant buildup.
Right.
And you're always prepared. What's your most important start? Your next one.
Your next
I
one.
never really went over the previous start with anybody. You know, I didn't get a damn iPad out and look at it.
Right.
They-
Well, the pitcher already knew what he did.
yeah. Well, you know what? I think Glavine said it best, and then all the other pitchers bought into it. You know, as far as if you have one of your horses, you know how that works.
Yeah.
Okay. He said, we practice so much off the mound under control that he says that when we're in a game, we can become our own pitching coach. And Leo doesn't have to come out to the mound because we can. If Leo comes out to the mound, that means we didn't figure out what we wanted to do. It was too late.
Right.
You know? So that was the best compliment you could ever get was if I teach them to be their own pitching coach.
Right.
Right.
Well, there's only one way to do that. Find out how to do that.
Side sessions.
Go down to the bullpen and practice it.
Yeah.
Everything we talk about is in baseball now. The problem is side sessions.
Yeah.
For pitchers.
I remember Smoltz asked DeGrom one time, well, you know, what he did in between. DeGrom said when he threw in between, he threw as hard as he could. You know, and Smoltz said, what are you, nuts? Are you crazy? We never did that. You know, but that's all they know. You know why they do that now? They think that if they don't do that, they lose velocity.
Mm.
And you know what? You're going to lose velocity. You can't pitch. You're going to have zero velocity because you're not out on the mound. But if, oh my God, he's down 2 miles an hour. Oh, panic time. How about the Strider? He throws 95 miles an hour, yet he's has trouble with that. If you tell me he can't be still, he's not throwing 98 or 99, he's throwing 95. He should still be extremely
Only
effective.
if I could throw 95.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And he's got
He's got good pitches.
he's got great.
It's funny you
he's
say
got
that.
great stuff.
About DeGrom because I was like, when was the last time I saw him pitch a full season? I know he was back in the rotation last year. From
Right.
21 to 24, he was injured. He didn't finish the season.
No. Throw it as hard as you can in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
But
Which
all
should have been
pitchers
his best
pitchers do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they wonder why everybody's breaking down and why you use 41 pitchers in a season. It's common sense.
Well,
But you know
bad
what?
Advice.
I don't understand why somebody can't figure that out. Whoever's in charge of the game.
Well, I bet you they know. This is just my opinion outside of looking in. They
Right.
know, but it's more of a pride thing. Most people don't want to admit that they're wrong. So they're just going to keep doing what they think. The wheel's already round.
Mm-hmm.
Don't reinvent the wheel. Just all you have to do is just nudge it.
Yeah.
And let the wheel roll.
Yeah.
And-
Well, you know, one time somebody told me, they said, well, you know what? You're throwing hard, you know, and this and that, and you break down, right? Now, when they come back, What do you do to adjust? Nothing. You threw the same thing that had you break down in the first place. What happens? Boom.
Breakdown.
I mean,
Right.
come on. You have to change something as far as
Right.
your approach.
Well, the definition of
Frank Tanana, the biggest conversion of a power guy to an off-speed guy.
He was the same as Nolan Ryan, but from the left side.
Yeah.
And then he became.
Yeah.
I used to get so mad. He couldn't break a window.
No, and he make you look sick.
But he'd throw that little cutter. You'd be on it, and then there goes your bat. I'm like, how did that guy break my bat?
Yeah. But you can do those types of things.
Right.
And everybody says, well, you can't do those things now. Of course you can.
Yeah.
Of course you can do stuff now.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like you said, they don't want to be,
that, and
knowledge is intimidating.
we talked about that last time you were on the show.
Yeah. Knowledge is intimidating, and that's
But the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different outcome.
right.
So it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. But it is ego.
Yeah.
I think pride and ego.
I think a lot of it's
come
they-
No,
together.
I don't think it's pride. I think it's stupidity.
A lot of it's reliance on technology, and all these pitchers now during the off season, they are going to these multi-million-dollar pitching facilities to gain 2 miles an hour on their fastball and more spin rate, and just damaging them even more.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Then by the time they graduate, they're damaged goods.
Right.
Which I don't see a problem with going to the multi-million-dollar facilities. I
Right.
don't. If they would implement your philosophy, you could do a world of good. I see technology as a blessing.
Yeah, of course, if you use it right.
Right.
Right. But like if you got a car on the racetrack and you're always going 100 miles an hour not constantly, that car is going to break down quicker
Mm-hmm.
than a car that's going 80.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it. I
75.
like that.
Well, you gave me props for something we said last time we were talking about training.
Yeah.
It's like you can do more at a lower intensity for
Right.
a longer duration repetitively, as
Jared,
opposed to
Jared Wright's a perfect example.
There you go.
Jared Wright.
There's a name.
Huh?
There's a name.
Yeah, and he came over from San Diego
Yeah.
after he drilled Chipper in the ribs. Anyway, Chipper comes over to me and says, "We get that deal with him, right?" And again, I said, "Yeah, we made a trade, got him." He goes, Jared walks through the door, right? Chipper goes, "Hey, did you hit me on purpose?" And Jared goes, "Yep." But anyway, so now we take him down the bullpen, and I'm going to have my session with him. I said, "Jared," I said, "I want you to throw me some fastballs." I said, "But don't throw them at 100%. I said, "Give me about an 80% effort,
Right.
It was okay. He had a recoil in his delivery, and he was throwing 94. This is before we got him, and he was all over the place. Then he'd recoil and pull back. And so anyway, he's winding up and throwing at 80%, and I'm looking at it. That's a beautiful delivery, smooth, Then I lined him up to where he could go to the outside corner, the down and away strike. He hit it every time. And I went, "Would you trust that in the game?" He goes, no way I would trust that in the game. He goes, "I've always thought they'd get over 100%. Da, da, da." I said, "Let me tell you something, Jared." I said, "If you don't trust that in the game, you're going to be in the same boat as you were in San Diego." I said, "You're going to get, you're going to get roughed up. You're going to hurt your shoulder again." I said, "And then you're going to be gone." I said, "But if you could trust that 90% effort will take care of the end result that you want," I said, you're going to be able to you'll be perfectly fine."
right.
"Was it that easy?" I said, "You got to try it. You got to gamble on it."
Yeah.
So, Bobby brings him in the 8th inning of a game in Montreal, and he goes 3 up, 3 down. He goes, "Is it supposed to be that easy?" I said, "It was, wasn't it?" He goes, Anyway, so he becomes a setup. He becomes a setup guy, right?
Yeah.
The next year, he goes, "I want to start." "Bobby, Jarrett wants to start. Make him the 5th starter, Leo." I said, "Okay." 15-game winner.
Yep.
Then he left and got big money for the Yankees, and what happened there? Nothing. It didn't pan out. But there you are.
But
Did he go back to?
But you know what? He got big money because of.
Oh yeah, he got big money because the Yankees said, "Well, what'd Mazzone do?" He goes, "Well," he said, "he pointed me in the right direction and told me to keep my effort under control." I said, and then Chris Hammond went over there too, and Hammond
That's
said,
right.
And Hammond said, he said, I had trouble there. He said, Stottlemyre he didn't know what I was talking about, basically.
Right.
You know, so.
And he made some money over there, too.
Well, yeah. And then John Burkett left and went to Boston, and he made some money over there, too. So. But that's good. I'm happy for him.
But they ended up nothing good came of it because they went back to their.
They went back, and then you did and you look. You always have to coach, and you never. Bobby Cox taught me this my first year. Don't ever take for granted, Leo, that a major league pitcher knows what he's doing.
Right.
Right.
So therefore, you're always coaching. Doesn't matter if it's Maddox. It doesn't matter if it's McMichael. It doesn't matter. You always coach. You know, you try to add something, you know, always get a little bit better. Right. In other words, you don't go in and say, well, I don't want to mess him up. You go in and figure out, well, let's see how we can get a little better here.
That's right.
That's all.
Well, that's what a coach
is supposed to do. But now all they do is listen to the propeller head, and that's when they write it down on a computer, say, okay, here. Oh, you got good stuff, but nobody's throwing strikes.
Nope.
Anyway.
So how much, let me ask you this, how much it's, and we may have already touched on this, how much of arm slot is anatomy, and then how much of it is more mindset and confidence, or is it just a natural
release?
Right.
Yeah. You want to get to an arm slot that your most natural release is.
Right.
You know, if you try to over-exaggerate, what you do in finding a good arm slot, too, you over-exaggerate to modify. That's what we always said. You over-exaggerate to modify. Over-exaggerate to modify.
Right. Okay.
Getting to that high three-quarter area.
Yes, sir.
You know, and so therefore, I don't think anatomy has anything to do with it. You know, but if somebody's got if somebody's got Clancy.
Right.
You know, Clancy did a great job for us from down under.
Well, let me ask you, was he an overhead guy and went down there because he was getting roughed up? It's like Tecovey.
Yeah.
Quisenberry.
Yeah. I don't know if that was with Clancy or not.
I don't know if it was those guys either.
Yeah.
But
well, some of them were.
It's filthy. You know, you're getting beat up here. You know what? Let me drop down here.
Yeah.
Throw that and that.
Yeah. It's a different look.
Ugh.
And Quisenberry said that he almost had to. He would hurt his drag his knuckles and hit the dirt.
He would. It came from out of the dirt.
Yeah.
Tecovey was a little more up. But he was still.
And you know what you had to when you have a pitcher like that, you have to make sure that he stays in that same arm slot.
Right.
With regardless of what pitch he throws, because guys will be down here with their fastball and they want to raise it just enough with their breaking ball.
Right.
And that's not easy to keep your same arm slot from down there when you raise it a little bit on your breaking ball, because then you're telegraphing the pitch.
Right.
So you have to teach that too. You have to watch.
Right.
You can't. I have to watch the game. Watch the game.
Right.
It's like Wade Boggs said today. He says, "Would you watch the game? Would you watch the pitcher? You got your mind on 10,000 different things from your iPad during the game." He said, "Relax. Let your natural ability come forward."
Right.
You know, so
well, minor leagues, they got computers in the dugout now. I mean, it's every at bat they
come in and look at the iPad.
Yeah,
look at it tomorrow. They shouldn't even be allowed to look at it tomorrow.
Remember how Bobby would get if somebody had a bad at bat and he ran into the clubhouse
and
you see it on TV? Oh boy!
Number one, they come back. That ball was outside. You know. And then now they're mad with the umpire.
Yeah.
Now you got ABS.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what though? It hasn't been too bad.
No, it hasn't.
What it has shown is how good umpires are.
Or bad.
Yeah. They missed
even with CB
Buckner.
Yeah, but some of those pitches
20 missed calls.
Yeah, but I mean, he missing.
They're a hair off.
So I think yesterday.
Back in the day, we used to get.
Oh, bro,
we used to get that much off.
We were talking about CB. We were talking about CB upstairs. He missed the bag.
Well, you can't miss that. But
No.
the pitches,
Yeah, some of them were
really
super
tough.
close.
Yeah,
I think
mean,
yesterday's Braves game, they were the umpire was 0 for 7 on challenges
Mhm.
until like the 8th or the 9th. I think we missed one. I think the Braves challenge and it was a
Yeah.
strike. But
I mean,
yeah.
they're
But how much are they off?
Some of the calls yesterday, 0.2, 0.1,
Yeah, that's what
0.3.
Yeah.
There was a couple
that's
that
tough.
I think there was two that were like a couple of inches, like 2 or
Right.
3 inches off the plate. And I'm like, I'm seeing it on TV. I'm like, and they sometimes forget to put the strike
Right.
zone up there.
I
I'm
wish
like,
they would forget it all the time.
that was a ball,
Right.
and they challenge it. But yeah,
Well, it actually is. It should give the umpires confidence because, okay, they challenged that and I missed it, but it was
yeah.
that
Yeah.
much. I mean,
That's how good they are.
that's how good they are.
that's not an easy job.
Oh. And
Well, you
they
call
make
it
it
one
harder and
way,
harder.
That
Yeah.
team's going to yell at you. You call it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a bad spot.
I would try
It's
to get the
lose,
kid-
lose.
Yeah.
I would try to get the
Win-lose.
kids in the minor leagues. Don't yell at the umpire.
No.
They're trying to get to the big leagues just like you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're going to miss
Sure.
calls, but as long as they're trying to do a good job and they're decisive, that's what I always told them. Be decisive in your
Mhm.
call. If you're going to call them out, boom.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Yeah.
be decisive. And you
I
know,
like that. That's good.
Well, at least you're confident in your.
I like
call.
umpires. I mean, they're part of the game.
Oh, I thought they were fun too, except
Yeah.
for Angel Hernandez and Joe West.
Okay, I didn't want to bring up Angel Hernandez. but-
Well,
okay.
yeah, I know. But, Joe West embarrassed me one time. We were in spring training, and Kerry Lightenberg was pitching, and I went out to the mound to make sure he was okay. And then he said, "Hey, Leo," and I stopped and turned back around, and my left foot was on the dirt of the mound. Two visits. You got to bring another pitcher in. I said, "Joe, it's spring training. That's the rule." I thought, I can't tell you on the air what I thought. And I'm like, what? Come on, man.
Yeah.
Right.
Where Angel we had a game in Arizona, right? And Glavine goes ball one, and it's down and away. It was a strike. And Glavine kind of did a double take. Angel takes his mask off and says, "No corners today." Bobby heard that
Mm.
and went bananas, Then he
Wow.
told me to, the only time, he says, "Leo, he was down in the tunnel in the 8th inning. He goes, go get thrown out." I said, "What?" He goes, "Go get thrown out." So I went out there and got thrown out.
Gladly.
Yeah. But anyway, but then most of them were, like I said, Hirschbeck, those guys were class acts.
Oh, yeah. He was.
And they're all great umpires, and
he
they're
was
funny.
a good guy. And
Yeah.
yeah.
There's just a few bad apples.
Just a couple, but that's everything and everywhere,
yeah.
I mean, come on. You hear about the 2 bad apples, but you don't hear about the 100 good ones.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, it's-
You
in life, you can do 100 or 99 things done right.
Yeah.
If you make one mistake, people are always going to hammer and focus
Abs-
on the one mishap, but they forget the other.
No
99
question.
that you did.
No question.
Always.
It's like if you have 10 pitchers going good, the only one that's one they want to ask you about is the one that's not.
Right.
Right.
I said, "I'll take 9 out of 10 any day of the week."
That's
Yeah.
right.
So. And you wanted 4 starters pitching 200 innings.
Yeah.
You only had three pitchers pitch 200 innings in the whole baseball.
So that's changed over the years.
Oh.
From early days, starters tried to complete games.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in the bullpen, it's because you got banished
That's right.
to the bullpen.
That's
Because
exactly
you were a
right.
starter that was giving it up, and then they put you in the bullpen.
That's
and
right.
then they would bring you in games that it was 12-0
Mm-hmm.
mop up
Mop up.
is what they
Yeah.
called it.
Yeah.
Now it's become so specialized. 7th, 8th inning, 9th inning. Got
Mhm.
you got your closers and
Well, you know what Sherholz used to tell me? Leo, he said, we have our starters and we have our closers. He says, it's your responsibility to find us some setup guys because the setup guys weren't being paid a lot then. Now,
Right.
Of course, now they are.
right. They're specialized.
And they should be.
Yeah.
But that's what he used to tell me. He says, starters are, he says, you all take care of the setup guys as to who you want on the club.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and those are guys that
Yeah.
I need a double play. You had a guy that threw a heavy
sinker.
pitch,
Yeah.
one that you couldn't hardly play catch with because it was like
Like catching a bowling ball.
Grabowski. I remember playing catch with him, and I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. Hurting my hand.
Well, you weren't a spring chicken anymore.
I was not a spring. Well, I was back then. Yeah, I mean, my 40s, I felt good. When I hit 50, I started. 60.
You just wait. It don't get any better. I'm going to tell you that.
Well,
Hate to bust your bubble, but
we can still swing a golf club. So
yeah, if that's what you want to call it for me. But anyway,
So we've talked about
yeah,
rules, changes in the game,
arm slots.
arm slots, pitching. Now I want to move into probably your favorite topic. We're going to skip over a little section, but now we're going to kind of segment into something, the tech shift. How video tracking and how technology has impacted the game somewhat. So when did you really first notice technology changing how pitchers were coached and evaluated? Was that like in 2001 when
with Quest Tech.
Quest
That's
Tech.
when
that
it
was about
started.
2001? Yeah.
That's when it started, and it was up in New York. And I used to try to mess with the machine to screw it up.
Yeah,
yeah.
And what do you think the game really? What do you think the game gained or lost from tracking, and what did it risk losing? Obviously, now we've had 20 so 25 years to really kind of look back on it.
We didn't have my last year in the big leagues was 08, and none of that had come into play yet. Basically, just the Quest Tech or whatever, but none of this other stuff came into play.
right.
And so then when I started listening to all this and hearing all this, and then the adaptability of the people who were in charge making themselves sound smart,
Right.
then the announcers playing TV or radio to make themselves sound smart when I know they know better, and then each year you had more and more and more stuff
Coming out.
Now you know what? There's nothing wrong with having that available to you,
Right.
Right.
but you have to be able to separate it.
Right.
And so now it's just strike zones. How about this? You tell me you can't teach somebody how to hit against it when they had to shift. You're giving the guy half the field.
Right.
Wade Boggs would hit 600, on the shift.
Well, back in the day, left-handers. Back in the day, there was less. I don't know what you call it, but they would just do this.
Yeah,
That's a base hit.
it's a base hit. You could walk to first.
Wait, we're one run down. Huh. You're gonna get.
Bunt.
Now I got the tying run on, winning run to the plate. You're going to shift again?
Bunt.
They would do that.
Well, and then they started talking about, as this thing has evolved, bunts don't do you any good. Hit and runs don't do you any good. A pitcher can only throw over to first base twice. They wondered why stolen bases were up about, whatever the percentage was. Oh, come on. And they don't explain to you that, well, if the pitcher's only allowed to do that a couple times, then what the heck you think's going to happen? It ain't going to go down.
Well, you know what? Somebody led the league in stolen base, and it was 60 bags. It used to be 100.
Yeah. Without the pitch over, not knowing when he was coming over.
Right. And you know what? You can only throw over twice. You
Right.
know what Bobby would have done?
Yeah.
He would have
Pitched out.
pitched out on the third pitch and got that guy running.
Yeah.
Because they take off on the third one because you're
Right.
thrown over twice. Bobby would just,
Mhm.
I'm going to pitch out. I got you.
Yeah.
But they don't do that. The analytics, they don't hit and run.
No.
Get a guy on second. We try to drive him in 3 times instead of ground ball.
Mm-hmm.
Ground ball.
Move him over.
1 run. How many games do you lose by 1 run?
Right.
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
And how about your strikeouts now? Nobody cares. Hitters used to be embarrassed if they struck out.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
A lot of that has to do with analytics too, because
Yes.
you get 2 strikes and they say,
don't cut your swing down.
"Yep, that's number 1." Number 2, he's going to throw this pitch in this count. So I'm looking for that pitch. He throws a fastball right there.
See,
I take a seat. 2 strikes, I battled, right? Battle, get a ground ball,
fight them off.
get that guy in. But
There was
that's the way it is now, and so
you know what?
that's the way it is.
And you know what? Another interesting thing that Wade Boggs talked about this morning was he said our feeling in our dugout with those great Yankee teams that he was with is that once that pitcher got to close to 90 pitches, he said then it was our ball game. For some reason, that was their thought process, you know. He said, so how do you get a pitcher to 90 pitches? You fight off the pitches that you're talking about.
That's right.
Well, there was 2 teams that did that really well against us, and that was the 93 Phillies and the 96 Yankees, and who fought. We make pitches that were outs, and they would somehow fight it off. And,
Right.
of course, Lenny Dykstra says, you know what I did, Leo? He says, I put my nose on the ball. We stuck our nose right on that ball. Now, don't take your nose off the ball. You know what? He was right.
He was right.
He was right.
It's pretty
Anyway, it's a pretty good
team.
way to put it, right?
Pretty good team. Both those teams.
Oh, that was a good team. They were dirtbaggers. They were good.
Yep.
Yeah, and but the radar guns and the this and that and is it you timing it coming across home plate or you timing it coming out of your hand? It's the dramatization of the game and the oohs and ahs and all this sort of thing now, and not actually a thinking man's game anymore. It's just a video game.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's what they want now. So, I mean, I'll still watch a ball game occasionally. Of course, if it's the Braves, I'm going to watch it.
right.
But I've watched 3 games last year from complete 3 games,
start to finish. Yeah.
start to finish, and that was the last 3 games of the World Series. But I still got to turn it on, and you got to take a peek at what's going on and this and that. That'll never change.
Yeah.
But,
They took away a lot of strategy for the manager when they
Yeah.
took away the pitcher hitting.
yeah, big time.
Yeah, because you had to have a guy. Your pitcher's coming up. I better have guys up in the pen. I better have
Yeah.
2 pinch hitters ready
Yeah,
because of the guy they got up.
yeah,
And Bobby always had those stats. He
yeah. And
This guy-
that card never left his hand.
never left his hand. Oh, this guy hits 340 off
Mhm.
that reliever.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, get up.
Yeah. No, yeah.
And he was ahead of the game. He
Oh.
was 2 innings ahead of the game.
Let me-
He knew.
Let me tell you something. My first couple of games, I was his pitching coach. And he goes, hey, Leo, this is the 5th inning, okay? He goes, hey, Leo. I said, yeah. He goes, pitcher could come up with the bases loaded and 2 outs in the 7th inning. We got to decide whether to pinch hit or not. I went, whoa. We're only in the 5th, I mean, put your thinking cap on, And then one time he chewed me out in L.A. We finally catch the Dodgers in 90. This is to show you the brilliance of Bobby Cox. We finally catch the Dodgers in 91, and we're tied for first place.
Mm.
And Smoltzy's pitching. He has a 5-0 lead in the 5th. Starts to get a little rattled, walk, base hit, air, whatever. And now you can see that he's losing his cool.
Yeah.
Look, John, go out to the mound. Look, John, you're not in any trouble here. What's your most important pitch? What? I said, no, your most important pitch is your next pitch. I said, if you can think of your most important pitch as your next pitch, you're going to have damage control. And if you have damage control, no
Right.
big deal.
Right.
I come back in. Now it's 5-3, 2nd and 3rd. Bobby goes, think we should take him out? I said, no, I'd give him one more hitter. I don't care. We're going to take him out anyway. I said, huh? I don't care what you want to do. I said, I'm going to take him out anyway. He starts, I said, well, you're the manager. Do what you want, You ask me a question, I'm always going to give you an answer. I don't care. I'm taking him out. Boom. Goes out to the mound. When he goes out to the mound, I take my hat off and scratch my head. Like, what in the world just happened here? Comes back in. Smoltzy sits down next to me. He says, what's going on? I said, you're fixing to blow it. That's what's going on. Now I'm mad. So I take it out on Smoltz. And so then Bobby comes in, doesn't speak to me the rest of the game. I said, uh-oh, something made him angry. Oh, somebody made a face. John must have made a face at him out on the mound because, that was a no-no. Or he flipped him the ball or something like that. I said, oh, boy, Now we have to get a reliever up. Bobby goes to the phone, gets the reliever up. I'm sitting in the dugout like this going on.
That's usually you.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, it's me. And anyway, so he goes, we win the game. We come in and go, by away, boys, away. We're in first place. Leo, come on in the door. Come on in my office and shut the door. I said, well, now I'm going to find out who ticked him off, So I go in the office, shut out the door. He goes, you ever take your head off again and scratch your head when I'm making a decision? Did you ever do that? I said, I didn't know I was doing it. You didn't want me to take him out, did you? I said, well, you asked me. Because I don't care. I was going to take him out anyway. You didn't want to take him. And I went, you asked me. He goes, I didn't want to take him out either. And I went.
He wanted you to be direct.
Yeah, what? He said, I didn't want to take him out either. He said, I'm going to tell you why I took him out, Leo. He said, I'm sending a message to your young starting rotation out there that I don't want to hear the word potential no more. We are fighting for a pennant. We're in first place, and we're not just going to give games away.
Right.
He said, no more potential. It's results. And I said, he goes, what do you think of that? I said, I think that's the smartest thing I ever heard. He goes, good, get the hell out of here.
Hall of Fame.
And I walked out and I went,
yep.
I'll be a son of a gun.
Yep.
And then the other one that I'll never forget is, Kenny, 1-0, 95 World Series. Glavine said he's tired after 8. I said, you sure? He goes, yeah. And we knew he was because the 7th inning, there were some balls hit to the wall. And so I said, Bobby, Glav's done. He goes, okay, tell Wohlers he's in. So we bring Wohlers, Now, to show you the difference in thinking, Kenny Lofton's leading off. And I'm thinking, boy, if he gets on, he's stealing second, he's stealing third. They're going to be at third with nobody out. And I said, Bobby, Bobby goes, look. He said, if he gets on and he steals second, he steals third, he goes, he's the only pitcher we got out there that will strike out the side after that. And I went,
yep.
I never even thought of that, I was thinking,
wow.
He said, he's the only one. He said, he'll strike out the side with a runner on third, nobody out.
That's right. Yeah,
that's the difference. We talked about the difference in great players, great managers,
right.
This and that. And
he didn't need all that.
He didn't need all that.
Analytics
He didn't
and all
need,
that.
no.
He knew.
He said,
that's called instinct.
That's right. And he said, Leo, you and I wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks in today's game.
Right.
And he's right. I can.
But he knew his.
He knew everything about it.
He knew his 7th inning guy. He knew Wohlers. He knew he was the guy.
I think that Bobby Cox is in the Hall of Fame because he's not only a great manager, but he was the greatest handler of pitchers that I ever saw in my lifetime.
Right.
As opposed to a lot of men, get him off the field. Let's get some work done. They're cussing you out or raising Cain or second guessing you.
Right.
Come on. Bobby made them first-class citizens, the pitchers.
Well,
and guess what? They told me they felt bad if they lost because they let Bobby down, not because they lost the game.
That's true leadership quality right there.
Absolutely.
And that's why so many guys wanted to come and play for Bobby.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember Billy Wagner. He used to walk by me when he was with Houston. Tell Bobby I want to pitch for him, and he ends up pitching for us.
Yeah.
But there were so many guys that
wanted
to
to play
for him.
Mm-hmm.
And but
well, you know what? You look back on it. Just think about this. On one team, in a decade and a half, third base Hall of Fame, center fielder Hall of Fame, 3 pitchers Hall of Fame, manager Hall of Fame, general manager Hall of Fame, all at one on the same time frame.
Right.
Goes to show you something.
Yeah, but you know what? There's some people that don't want to hear it. Listen to that thing. how did you guys do it? When you explain to them how we did it, a lot of them don't want to listen.
Yeah.
I don't say a lot of them. I'd say 99% of them don't.
Well, that's because they say, analytics say
Mm-hmm.
different.
But you know what? Hub, you know this. The people out there ought to know that we're not totally against analytics if you use it as the right way. But if you just totally go by that, it's not going to work.
Oh, I loved it when I became an infield guy and they started.
Yeah.
They would hand you a piece of paper of every ground ball that Tony Gwynn hit.
Yeah.
And you could look at it and say, well, second base has got to play here.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's got to play here. That's why they came up with the shift and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But the only reason they could do shift is because nobody would. Or
You know, I asked a minor league hitting coach one time. I said, "How come you don't teach guys to beat the shift?" He goes, "We've been told not to mess with their swing."
that's right. Well, again, in baseball, you hear this game of adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're a pitcher, hitter, infielder, it's a game of adjustment.
Absolutely.
So,
And that started in the 1800s.
Yeah.
A game of
well,
adjustment.
it's funny when you look back on then. They let the hitters hit the ball,
Yeah.
and then their thinking was, well, let me throw it to a spot so when they do hit the ball, it's hit at my infielder.
Mm-hmm.
So you got pitching and defense and location.
Mm-hmm.
All
Amazing, isn't it?
it's amazing. They've gotten away from that though.
Oh, absolutely. Not even close.
It's all about
Well,
hitting dingers and launch angles. And
Yeah.
well, that's right. And
Exit velocity.
and this is all about spin rate, which is try to make the guy miss.
Mm-hmm.
Throw harder and try to make him miss. Well, what
They
did-
call it swing and miss pitches now.
Yep.
They call that's a term. Oh, does he have a swing and miss pitch? How about can you get him off balance? Can you
right,
can you get some touch on the ball?
right. Well, what did Hammer say? You could time
Time a jet coming through the strike zone if you see it often enough.
greatest, and he was great.
Oh, great to work for too.
Oh yeah, just to listen to his thinking.
You just
When
keep your mouth shut and listen.
When he came into a room, if he started talking baseball, everybody in the room would shut up and just kind of, they would move in. You could have a sense of guys leaning in close because I want to hear what he has to
You
say.
ain't kidding.
Awesome.
And then you got some guys that are talking,
Yeah. Well, they're not going to go
you're
anywhere.
talking about, dinner that night or whatever. But when he came in, he was special.
You know how many times I talked to Don Sutton? Don Sutton won 300 and some games and was never on the disabled list for 20 years.
How about
You don't
that?
think I wasn't going to pick his brain?
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
I'm always curious. We didn't include this, but guys back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they would pitch entire
Games.
no injury.
No.
Complete starts.
Complete starts. I wonder
That was
if
the expectation. I mean, you're pitching the whole game.
When I was pitching in the minor leagues in the late 60s and 70s, if I was starting and I didn't complete that game, I felt I was a fail. I didn't pitch a good game.
That's right.
but now you get like a four inning pitcher. Now you
Standing
gotta
ovation at 4 2/3 for leaving the game with the lead.
You got 4 inning
Serger.
pitcher, and then you got a 2 inning pitcher, a 7th, an
Yeah.
8th, a 9th, and it's like the difference.
It's called starting throwing and relief throwing. It's not called pitching anymore. It's starting throwing and relief throwing.
Well, that goes back to a segment, the starter's mentality.
Right.
It used to be, I'm going to finish the game. I'm
And
going
how about this one? You ain't taking me out with a no-hitter.
You're not taking me out with,
Period.
I got a 5-1 lead and 4 2. I'm not going to get a win. No, you're not taking me out. I'm going to at least.
And if you do take him out, what are you going to what's going to happen in that dugout?
Oh, he's going to slam stuff.
Oh, you ain't a kidding.
Oh,
Now everybody's you come in, they're happier. I did my job. I was 4 2/3. And you got a no hitter going, and you're happy that they took you out. Give me a break.
Right.
There'd be some blows going on in that bullpen, in that dugout.
The mentality.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
so different.
So that starter mentality, I hear a lot now as well in games. Is I usually don't miss a game. Is they're going to take him out early because he's hitting that 80 pitch count. They want to build him up throughout the season. Every start go a little bit longer every single time, so that he's not broken down in October.
We build him up in spring training.
Yeah,
I was
what are you
going to
there
ask
for?
you that. Did you have a pitch count going in to the season?
90, the first start.
First start.
Then after that, nothing.
Right.
First start, about 90 pitches.
Okay.
Because you raise the intensity level. From
Right.
spring training to then, you raise the intensity level. So there's going to be automatically more effort.
Right.
So we made the adjustment for their first start. Okay, 90 pitches. And
Right.
then after that, didn't have a number.
Right.
Yeah,
Usually
didn't have
based
enough.
off
But
feel.
what
feel.
what you did.
But you looked at him and said,
oh yeah.
max effort
Yeah.
inning.
Mm-hmm. And I had a clicker.
That's right.
I knew how many they were throwing before they put them up on the board. A lot of times they used to lie, cheat.
Sometimes they had a lot of pitches, but it's easy pitches.
Easy pitching.
And then there's this guy's had some tough innings, man.
He's done. Yeah.
He's done.
Yep. No, no
And that's
3 up,
where
3 innings.
that's where the pitching coach, who's getting paid to be a pitching coach, helps the manager.
Yeah.
And you're both looking at him. He's done.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. No,
he's breezing.
yeah. Oh, he's on cruise right now.
That's right.
I mean,
Now it's just all about
numbers, percentages.
he's got 80 pitches.
Yeah.
He's done.
Oh, third time around the lineup now. Got to
Oh,
take him out.
That's right.
Yeah, and then they show the splits. This is his split. There's the batting average versus him, and his first time through the lineup, his second time through the lineup, his 3rd
Mhm.
time through the round.
Yeah.
And that's all they're showing now. So this is where they're going to do damage. Okay. So
I think,
Yeah, well,
I think
yeah.
sometimes the more data you show, it makes people continue to be
Yeah.
anxious.
Yeah.
The more numbers you're always seeing constantly put in front of your face,
yeah,
it can make people anxious. Like, he's at 100, he's at 100 pitches. Oh, he's
Yeah.
at 110. Third time through the lineup. Oh, more numbers you see, obviously, it puts people in a panic state.
Right.
And what I could go back to something that happened about 6 years ago, that they always kept flashing numbers up on the screen on every news cycle you ever watched. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to go down that where they kept the constant running toll. But yeah, it puts people in a state of anxiety, and that's already that's a psychological document.
Mm-hmm.
let them pitch.
Well, as I tell my wife all the time, the world has passed me by.
Well, we're gonna have to
We're
get together again.
dinosaurs.
We're gonna have to get together again. I
still got a lot to talk
want to
about.
come up to. I want to come
Yeah.
up to where you're at and play on one of those golf courses. With
Yeah.
yeah.
We need-
Come up and play with you and
Yeah.
Pops over here. But I just want to say thank you again for
Leo, thanks.
coming out.
Oh, I love it because you're talking real baseball here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you actually you're
Yeah.
talking to Glenn Hubbard, who played how many years in the big leagues?
Yeah.
Well, come on. We went through everything you can possibly get through from minor leagues on up and
you
how it all
you saw
works.
multiple eras. You saw multiple eras of pitching.
Mm-hmm.
You got obviously the rare ability to explain what changed without losing what mattered. And, obviously this was a deep dive, kind of something that's never been really discussed as far as like the history of pitching and
Yeah.
but pitch tracking, workload development, but obviously
Workload.
the takeaway is obviously clear. It's no matter the era, the pitchers who wins are the ones who can obviously compete and make the adjustments that they have to do, they have to make and execute. But we talked about this a couple days after the last show that you came on, that this is something we wanted to kind of do, but I just wanted to say
fun.
we
this is
appreciate you
awesome.
for driving out here.
It's fantastic.
It's
And thank you for joining us in the new
yeah. Hey, this is
This-
pretty sharp right here, boy.
new studio.
But I would expect nothing different.
Oh, from him? Yeah, from him. We just want to say thanks for giving our audience
Yes,
tidbits, because I mean, every time, you know, I always hear him over the years when he talked about you. It's just like, it's just you would just get nuggets. You just get nuggets out of him.
Oh, yeah.
It's like how you thought, your whole thought process behind pitching.
Yeah.
Well, if there's young pitching coaches out there, or young coaches out there, little league coaches,
You need to listen.
you need to listen.
Or just
Just-
pitchers.
Minor league coaches, side sessions, 60% touch and feel,
Yeah.
throw strikes with all your pitches.
Make the ball do something without maxing out your effort.
There you go.
Yep.
And if you can do that, when you get on the mound, you're going to be a little more effort anyway.
You
Just
say the word we used to say was you're going to firm everything up.
that's right.
Firm it up. No, I'm not saying throw harder. You're going to firm everything up.
Trademark that. Put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah. Firm everything up. Well, that
You
could
take
take
that-
a couple
yeah.
different ways
Yeah,
there.
you
You know?
can, yeah,
We got to be
absolutely.
careful there.
I was gonna add to that, but I'm not.
No, don't do
I'm
that.
not going to. But for everybody else watching, listening, I just want to say thank you. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Go follow us on Spotify so you don't miss an episode. And a little bit of a teaser. We do have a
Big announcement coming up.
somewhat of a big announcement coming up here in the next couple of weeks, and there's going to be a slight change to the studio, and we'll see if you guys can catch it. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Talk to you guys next time.
Take care, everybody.